Welcome back to Sweet Revenge Reddit. Another story, another shocking betrayal. Brace yourself for the dark twists ahead. Let's dive in. I'm younger, prettier, and now I'm the one getting the billionaire lifestyle. My sister laughed as she eloped with my fiancé 2 days before my wedding. She thought she was stealing a prince. She didn't realize I'd spent 6 months and $50,000 to find a man so deep in debt and legal trouble that her happily ever after was actually a one-way ticket to financial ruin. Before we reveal how a stolen groom became a lifelong sentence of karma, tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you believe that backstabbing siblings deserve exactly what they get, hit that subscribe button to join our community. My name is Delilah, and I spent most of my life being the responsible one in a family that treated responsibility like a disease. We grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, in a house where the paint was always peeling, but the mirrors were always polished. My mother, Gloria, was a woman who measured the value of a person by the brand of their handbag and the zip code of their primary residence. And then there was my younger sister, Saffron. Saffron was the kind of girl who believed the world was a vending machine designed solely for her convenience. She was beautiful, yes, in that sharp, manicured way that suggested she spent more time on her eyeliner than her education, and she was my mother's undisputed favorite. I was the girl with the steady job in forensic accounting, the one who paid the property taxes on the family home when Gloria forgot, and the one who worked 60 hours a week to build a life of quiet stability. The inciting incident occurred during the planning of my dream wedding. I had met a man named Julian, or so I told my family. In the eyes of Gloria and Saffron, Julian was the ultimate catch. I portrayed him as a reclusive billionaire, a tech mogul who preferred the shadows of private jets and offshore banking to the limelight of Silicon Valley. I intentionally left brochures for luxury estates in the Hamptons lying around, and I made sure Saffron, accidentally, overheard phone calls where I discussed Julian's 8-figure investment portfolios. The bait was set. Saffron, who had spent her 20s hopping from one failed influencer career to another, looked at Julian not as her sister's partner, but as her ticket out of the mundane. She began showing up to my apartment uninvited, wearing her tightest dresses, laughing a little too loudly at Julian's mediocre jokes, and constantly making subtle jabs at my boring personality. "Are you sure you can handle a man like this, Delilah?" She'd purr, her eyes fixed on the fake 5-carat diamond ring I had Julian buy me. A man with his resources needs a woman with fire. My mother, Gloria, was the silent cheerleader of this betrayal. She didn't just ignore Saffron's blatant flirting, she actively facilitated it. She would pull me aside and tell me I was suffocating Julian with my talk of budgets and retirement accounts. "A man like that wants to spend, Delilah. He wants adventure. You're making him miserable with your spreadsheets." The emotional weight of seeing my own mother encourage my sister to steal my future husband was a cold, hollow pain that settled in my chest. I watched them whisper in the kitchen, their eyes darting to me with a mixture of pity and predatory glee. They thought I was the oblivious, frumpy accountant who didn't realize she was being hunted. The environmental details of those weeks were suffocating. The smell of Saffron's heavy, expensive perfume that seemed to mark Julian as her territory, the way the Chicago winter wind rattled the windows of my mother's house like a warning, and the sight of Julian, a man I had handpicked for his desperation, playing the part of a wealthy prince to perfection. They didn't know I was the one writing his script. The betrayal was finalized 48 hours before the ceremony. I came home to find a note on the kitchen table and a photo on Instagram. Saffron and Julian had eloped to a private island, actually a cheap resort in a non-extradition country I'd suggested. Saffron's caption read, "Sorry sis, some girls are just born for the throne. Stole your man billionaire wife upgrade." Gloria didn't even look at me when I read it. She just sighed and said, "It's for the best, dear. She's more his speed." They thought they had broken me. They didn't realize they had just walked into the cage. The breaking point didn't come with a flood of tears or a dramatic confrontation. It came with the absolute, chilling silence of a woman who had finally run out of empathy. For years, I had been the family's safety net. I was the one who rescued Saffron from her mounting credit card debt and the one who paid for my mother's medical emergencies that usually turned out to be cosmetic procedures in South Beach. I had lived my life as a secondary character in their glamorous, hollow drama. But standing there in that empty kitchen, looking at Saffron's mocking Instagram post, I felt a psychological shift that was permanent. The good daughter died that afternoon. The forensic accountant took over. I realized that my mother and sister didn't just want Julian, they wanted the idea of Julian. They wanted the shortcut. They wanted the prize without the work, and they were willing to gut me like a fish to get it. Saffron's arrogance was a towering, nauseating thing. She truly believed that her beauty gave her a divine right to take whatever she wanted. In her mind, I was just a placeholder, a boring, beige obstacle that she had successfully cleared. She didn't love Julian, she loved the status she thought he carried. And Gloria? Her personality was a toxic blend of vicarious ambition and cold-hearted pragmatism. She saw Saffron as her winning lottery ticket. To her, I was just a reliable appliance, useful, but not something you show off to the neighbors. The internal emotional struggle I felt was a war between the remains of my family loyalty and a new, predatory hunger for justice. I spent that first night sitting on the floor of my half-packed apartment, surrounded by the wedding favors I had paid for, realizing that they hadn't just betrayed me, they had celebrated it. They had laughed at my expense while sipping champagne I had bought. I realized then that Saffron's greatest weakness was her lack of curiosity. She was so blinded by the flash of Julian's wealth that she never once did a background check. She never asked why a billionaire tech mogul didn't have a LinkedIn profile or why his private jet always seemed to be in the hangar for maintenance. If she had looked for even 5 minutes, she would have seen the real Julian, a man named Marcus whose tech empire was actually a series of failed Ponzi schemes that had left him with a federal tax lien so large it would take 3 lifetimes to pay off. He wasn't a reclusive billionaire. He was a man on the run from the IRS, several angry bookmakers in Las Vegas, and a list of creditors that stretched from New York to Miami. I had found Marcus on a dark web forum for legal fixers. He was desperate, facing 20 years for wire fraud and looking for a way out. I made him a deal. I would pay off his immediate, most dangerous debts and provide him with a clean identity and enough cash to disappear to a remote coastal town in South America, but only after he had successfully wooed and eloped with Saffron. I didn't just want her to lose her sister. I wanted her to gain a millstone. I wanted her to be legally bound to a man whose very presence in the USA was a felony in waiting. The psychological satisfaction of knowing she was currently honeymooning on a resort I had paid for, using a credit card that was about to be maxed out, was a cold comfort that fueled my next moves. As I watched the likes on Saffron's elopement photos climb into the thousands, I felt a sense of dark, clinical detachment. Every comment calling her a queen or goals was a future receipt for her humiliation. Gloria called me that night, not to apologize, but to ask if I would be sensible enough to return the deposits on the wedding flowers and give the money to Saffron for her new life. She's starting over, Delilah. She needs the capital to maintain the lifestyle Julian expects. You're an accountant, you can make the numbers work. That was the final nail. My mother didn't just want me to lose, she wanted me to fund my own replacement. I sat at my desk, the glow of my dual monitors illuminating a web of financial traps I had been setting for months. I wasn't just going to let them run. I was going to ensure that when the billionaire fantasy dissolved, there was no safety net left to catch them. In the USA, the legal system can be a scalpel or a sledgehammer. I was preparing to use both. Saffron thought she had escaped the boring life of a Chicago accountant. She didn't realize that she had just married into a federal investigation. She had traded a sister for a fugitive and a home for a life of hiding. My struggle was over. The plan was in motion, and the countdown to their total, public destruction had begun. I didn't need a wedding dress anymore. I needed a front row seat to the circus I had created. The silent plan was a masterpiece of forensic engineering and psychological manipulation. To Saffron and Gloria, I was the broken woman hiding in her apartment, licking her wounds. In reality, I was a digital architect, building a house of cards that was designed to collapse the moment the wind changed. My advantage was twofold. I understood the American financial surveillance system, and I knew exactly how greedy people think. In the USA, if you want to destroy someone without ever touching them, you don't use a weapon. You use the IRS, the credit reporting agencies, and the cold, hard reality of joint and several liability. The first step was the marital bind. By encouraging Saffron to elope with Julian Marcus in a jurisdiction that shared reciprocity with the United States, I ensured that their marriage was legally recognized back home. This was crucial. Under American law, specifically in the context of debt collection and tax liens, a spouse's assets can often be reached to satisfy marital debts or community liabilities depending on the state. But more importantly, I had Marcus sign a series of business loans and investment guarantees before they left. I had set up a shell company called Apex Thorn Holdings, a name that sounded prestigious but was actually a legal vacuum I controlled. I had Marcus sign documents as a partner with Saffron listed as a secondary guarantor. Her arrogance was so absolute that when Marcus told her she needed to sign some standard billionaire paperwork to access their joint trust, she scribbled her name with a flourish, thinking she was signing her way into a life of yachts and caviar. The second step was the credit cascade. Saffron had always been a parasite on my credit score, often using my name as a co-signer for her failed boutiques. I spent 3 weeks systematically untangling our finances. I closed every joint account, revoked her authorized user status on my premium cards, and placed a total freeze on my credit reports. But I didn't stop there. I knew she would try to use Julian's wealth to open new lines of credit. I had Marcus take her to a high-end jewelry store in Miami, a place I knew had a strict, automated credit verification system. He bought her a $100,000 tennis necklace using a pre-approved line of credit I had secretly funneled through one of his debtor accounts. In the eyes of the credit bureaus, Saffron was now linked to a man with a code-red financial history. Her personal credit score, the only thing she had left of value, plummeted 300 points in a single afternoon. The third step was the IRS inevitability. This was the core of the trap. Marcus had a federal tax lien against him that exceeded $4 million. In the USA, the IRS is the one creditor you cannot outrun, outhide, or outsmart. I knew that the moment they filed a joint tax return, or even just lived as a married couple with co-mingled assets, the IRS would be alerted to Saffron's bank accounts. I spent hours at my desk, meticulously documenting every gift and loan I had given Saffron over the last 5 years. I reclassified them as unreported income in a series of anonymous tips to the IRS whistleblower office. If she wanted to be a billionaire's wife, she was going to have to account for every cent like a billionaire. I was setting her up for a comprehensive audit that would look into every boutique purchase, every luxury vacation, and every penny she had ever squeezed out of me. The suspense of the plan was a slow, agonizing burn. I watched Saffron's social media like a hawk. She was posting from a luxury villa in Belize, a property I knew was actually a short-term rental Marcus had paid for with a check that was destined to bounce. She was wearing designer clothes she hadn't paid for and drinking champagne that cost more than my monthly mortgage. I could see the cracks forming in her photos. Julian looked increasingly nervous, and Saffron's smiles looked more forced. The mystery for her was why the black card Julian gave her kept getting declined at high-end restaurants. She thought it was just banking errors. She had no idea she was being monitored by the very institutions she thought she was above. The final tactical move involved my mother, Gloria. I knew Gloria had put her own house up as collateral for a bridge loan she gave Saffron for the elopement. She thought Julian would pay her back 10 times over within a month. I used my connections in the Chicago real estate circuit to ensure that the bridge loan was bought by a debt collection agency known for its aggressive tactics. I wanted Gloria to feel the pressure of the system she had helped use against me. I wasn't just taking away their future, I was dismantling their past. Every step was documented, every legal loophole was closed, and every financial trap was baited with their own greed. I sat in my quiet apartment, the Chicago skyline glowing in the distance, feeling like a predator waiting for the first sign of blood. The silent plan was complete. The elopement was over. The debt was about to be called in. The execution of the trap was not a single explosion. It was a series of synchronized detonations that leveled Saffron and Gloria's world in under 72 hours. The sweet revenge began on a Tuesday morning, the day Saffron and Marcus, Julian, returned to the USA, landing at O'Hare International Airport. Saffron expected a limousine and a welcoming committee. Instead, as they cleared customs, Marcus was pulled aside by 3 plainclothes officers from the Financial Crimes Division. Because I had anonymously tipped off his creditors that a man matching his description was traveling under a specific alias, the warrant for his unpaid federal judgments was flagged the moment his passport hit the scanner. Saffron stood there in her $2,000 airport lounge set, screaming at the officers about who her husband was, while the man she thought was a billionaire was handcuffed and led away without looking back. He had already served his purpose. The downfall moved from the airport to my mother's living room. Gloria was busy preparing a welcome home brunch, expecting Saffron to arrive with a briefcase full of Julian's repayment for her bridge loan. Instead, there was a knock at the door from a process server. The debt collection agency I had alerted had moved with terrifying American efficiency. Because Saffron had signed those Apex Thorn Holdings documents as a secondary guarantor, and Julian had defaulted on the bridge loan from my mother, the agency was initiating a foreclosure proceeding on Gloria's house. I had made sure the debt was ironclad. Gloria, who had spent her life mocking my boring spreadsheets, finally found herself crushed by the numbers. She called me 30 times that afternoon, her voice hysterical, begging me to talk to Julian's people and fix the misunderstanding. I didn't answer. I sat in my favorite armchair, sipping a tea that cost $4, watching the drama unfold through a series of frantic voicemails. The public humiliation was the final, satisfying blow. Saffron, desperate to maintain her billionaire wife image, tried to check into a luxury hotel in downtown Chicago after Marcus was detained. Every single one of her credit cards was declined. The jewelry Marcus had bought her. When she tried to hawk the $100,000 tennis necklace to pay for a lawyer, the jeweler laughed in her face. It was high-quality cubic zirconia, a prop I had provided Marcus as part of his costume. The news of the billionaire fraud hit the local Chicago business blogs by evening. Saffron's Instagram, once a shrine to her stolen lifestyle, became a hunting ground for people she had bragged to. The comments turned from goals to scammer in a matter of hours. She was forced to call a rideshare, which I also ensured she couldn't pay for, and ended up on Gloria's doorstep, both of them homeless and facing a mountain of debt that was legally, inextricably theirs. The consequences were absolute. Marcus took a plea deal, testifying that Saffron was fully aware of the financial maneuvers to avoid taxes, dragging her into the federal investigation. Saffron wasn't just broke. She was under indictment for conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The IRS audit I triggered revealed years of her unreported income, the money she stole from me, resulting in a tax bill that would garnish her wages for the next 30 years if she could even find a job. Gloria's house was sold at auction. The woman who prized her social standing above her own daughter's heart ended up living in a cramped, one-bedroom apartment in a part of the city she used to call the gutter, working as a part-time receptionist to pay off the interest on her ruined credit. I moved on with a cold, quiet grace. I didn't stay in Chicago to watch them rot. I took a high-level position at a prestigious firm in Seattle, far away from the toxic echoes of my family. I used the money I had saved from the wedding and the whistleblower reward I received from the IRS for reporting Marcus to buy a beautiful home overlooking the water. I didn't need a billionaire to give me a throne. I built my own. I kept a single photo of Saffron's elopement in a drawer, not as a memento of pain, but as a trophy of my own intelligence. She thought she was a queen who stole a prince. She was just a pawn who took the bait. I move through my life now with the absolute empowerment that comes from knowing exactly who I am and what I'm capable of. I am Delilah, and I am the only accountant they will ever truly fear. If you loved seeing Delilah turn her sister's billionaire dream into a legal nightmare, hit that like button. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to deal with a family member who thought they could outsmart you? I want to hear your stories of justice. Don't forget to subscribe to Sweet Revenge Reddit for more stories where the underdog always holds the receipts. See you in the next one.